your infinite mental powers. This particular mind map is going deeper into the two gifts of speech and mind. Hermetic philosophy said that we were given two gifts, speech and mind. Speech can also be associated with what we imagine, what we are interpreting, what we are believing, what we are assuming. And mind being the container that is filled up with these interpretations, speech, inner speech, and expresses and reveals itself as outer world experience, five-sensory world. So one of the things that we do to exercise this gift that we have, which is speech, and to be able to experience what we desire to experience, which is revealed through mind, is we set a vision, we set a dream. Dream big, set higher expectations, achieve more. Now, this goes beyond ambition. This is realization. He says, the I of you is not that physical body. That is simply an instrument which the I uses to carry out its purpose. The I cannot be the mind, for the mind is simply another instrument which the I uses with which to think, reason, and plan. The I must be something which controls and directs both the body and the mind, something which determines what they shall do and how they shall act. When you come into a realization of the true nature of this I, you will enjoy a sense of power which you have never before known. Your personality is made up of countless individual characteristics, habits, and traits of character. These are the result of your former methods of thinking, but they have nothing to do with the real I. When you say I think, the I tells the mind what it shall think. When you say I go, the I tells the physical body where it shall go. The real nature of this I is spiritual and is the source of the real power which comes to men and women when they come to the realization of their true nature. Now, one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up here, which, by the way, if you haven't read the Master Key System, I recommend reading it. I've been reading it for many years. And as I continue to read it, I further unravel deeper understandings of what has been discussed as a result of experience. Now, this is why we speak of creating dreams or visions, is through committing to a vision and seeing it all the way to completion, we understand this information at a deeper level. We understand what was revealed to us, which was how we received the two gifts of speech and mind. So we have the gifts of speech and mind, and we can use the gifts of speech and mind to experience, to create, to, more accurately put, reveal what is already there. Now, we do this by developing a clear sense of direction, to do what we love to do, because it's easier for us to commit to that which we love. Committing to what we love, we've been discussing, develops unwavering, lighthearted conviction. And if for whatever the reason may be, we experience any kind of tension or reactivity as we maintain true to that vision, we can identify what these interpretations are that are stored in mind, and we can release from them. The I has the ability to observe these interpretations and change the interpretations. You have the ability. This is developed by what we would call mental strength, and he states, mental strength is secured in exactly the same way that physical strength is secured, by exercise. We think something, perhaps with difficulty the first time. We think the same thing again, and it becomes easier this time. We think it again and again. It then becomes a mental habit. We continue to think the same thing. Finally, it becomes automatic. We can no longer help thinking this way. We are now positive of what we think. There is no longer any doubt about it. We are sure we know. So let's look at that last part there. It says, there's no longer any doubt about it. We are sure we know. So this means as we stay committed to a vision, as we say, okay, this is what we're desiring to see brought forth, certain level of results in the business. Maybe it's a relationship goal. And for whatever the reason may be, we experience what we call doubt on the journey. It's important to recognize, as we've been discussing, that the doubt has no power until we give it that meaning that it has power. And what we usually assign as far as interpretations, although primarily unconsciously, is reactivity or tension. Now, when we recognize that this reactivity and attention is revealing something about what we are storing in mind, we find ourselves less identified with that reactivity or tension. We realize we are transcendent to that. As he had stated, the I must be something which controls and directs both the body and the mind, something which determines what they shall do and how they shall act. Although many of our beliefs, assumptions, and interpretations have been formed, right, as he stated here also, your personality or the identity or the self-image is made up of countless individual characteristics, habits, and so forth. Now, our goal is to, and we've been discussing it over the videos, align with the identity that's reflective of the vision. We see ourselves at that end being that person, experiencing that dream. That individual has a clear sense of direction, which is you, a different aspect of you. That person has a clear sense of direction of how to bring you from where you are right now over to that end. And we call this inner voice conversation or conversation with our higher self. But one of the things that we want to do to facilitate this further is recognize this important truth right here. And we discussed this in the video that we released last week, in which I brought up a quote from the book, The Kabbalion. Both the optimist and pessimist are right from their point of view. And this point of view is the determining factor in each of their lives. So at any given point, we're presented with an opportunity, a choice. We could choose to see whatever we're experiencing on the journey to the realization of our vision from a place of pessimistic, or we could see it from the perspective of optimistic. When we look at something that shows up, the mind interacts with that particular element, and the element reveals our interpretation within, is revealing something that we are identifying with subconsciously. And one of the interpretations that we want to give to whatever it is that shows up on the journey is, how can we integrate it if we need to integrate it? Essentially, how can we make peace with that outer world element? Because this peace brings us into a higher degree of awareness on the meaning. Because once we have been reactive to whatever it is that has shown up, then a lot of times we might find it challenging to, in that moment, understand that the I is saying, I am this, I am that, to thought processes in regards to that experience. We want to recognize that this is happening unconsciously. It's being revealed by the subconscious through our reactivity. Now he states, the subconscious mind is part of the universal mind. Okay, so the title of this mind map is Your Infinite Mental Powers. And you have a subconscious mind that is part of the universal mind. He says the universal mind is the creative principle of the universe. A part must be the same in kind and quality as the whole. This means that this creative power is absolutely unlimited. It is not bound by precedent of any kind, and consequently has no prior existing pattern by which to apply its constructive principle. We have found that the subconscious mind is responsive to our conscious will. So, when we say I am something, I can or I cannot, it's not possible or it is possible, whatever meaning we are assigning to it, we are also, as stated here, allowing the subconscious mind to respond to that in some shape or form. See, Most of our experiences behaviorally and what we express in the outer world, which source is from the mind, is what we would call unconscious or automatic. And if we had to think about every last detail about every behavior that we would do, for example, if you're looking at this from the place of an entrepreneur or an athlete, you recognize that every day you've got to make a lot of decisions, many decisions. An athlete during a performance or during a game performs in a way that would reveal the degree of what we would call unconscious competence at that particular sport. The degree is revealed. They'll know based on their performance. When they recognize that there are certain areas of the game that they need to improve on, or an entrepreneur, let's say, goes out and conducts business, does the day-to-day activities, and reflects back at the end of the day and sees the different areas that they can optimize, they will start to reveal what is within the subconscious. So when he was referring to earlier, mental strength is secured in the exact same way that physical strength is secured by exercise. Just like how we get stronger with exercise, we also reflect back on our workouts, our nutrition, and so forth, and figure out how to optimize. The same is to be said about mind. Now, this mental strength is not a force-based thing. How we would apply strength to exercise, for example, strength in weightlifting. It's different with the mind. Because, as he had stated, the I of you is not the physical body. That is simply an instrument which the I uses to carry out its purpose. The physical exertion of exercise is different as far as the plane of causation that we're talking about here. And what we're talking about is mental understanding. Mental understanding is mental strength. So, understanding that we are assigning the meaning, understanding that our subconscious mind is part of a universal mind, reveals the infinite mental powers. Now, when you have a goal, when you have a vision, you see to it all the way to completion. On the journey, we reveal the kind of interpretation we're giving to whatever it is that we're experiencing. And if a person finds this reactivity or tension, they can understand what it means. And as a result of identifying the meaning that they are interpreting to this, they can change it. So they no longer feel that resistance, such as an athlete then starts to perform better, starts to perform more naturally. Someone in public speaking begins to express a lot more. The communication was meant to be expressed. Or also, an entrepreneur, for example, might find themselves automatically being more productive, doing the sales calls, connecting with the prospects, building a relationship with the team. Very natural. And what they will also find is that they will start to receive hunches and inspirations, inner voice conversation within, intuition, which reveals this connection to the universal mind. And this philosophy, or this way of looking at it, is accurate to the understanding that you are one with this infinite power. Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich calls it infinite intelligence. But the reason why we look at things from an optimistic perspective, it's not to say that by looking at it from the pessimistic perspective that it is not valid. It is rather to say that by looking at whatever it is in relation to what shows up to your vision from the optimistic perspective. For example, when I reflect back on my experiences in my journey of life into entrepreneurship, let's say, what I noticed is that when I would have an idea of bringing something forth, say I had a way of marketing, let's say, I had a certain view of how it was going to play out, and I believed it was going to work. Now, what I found is that it seemed to be different than what other people were doing, but I ended up doing it. And what I found was, if I had communicated to someone about it and I was riddled with doubts within myself, that the conversation would seem pessimistic. So the person would say, oh, it's not possible, that's not the way to do it, other people don't do it, and so forth. But intuitively, I know that that was either going to work or it was going to open up a pathway to making it work, We talked about this a few videos ago. We said this is about the individualized journey into higher degrees of self-realization, as much as it is about bringing forth our vision. So, that stated, we reveal our infinite mental powers by staying committed. So, there's a book that I did a discussion on, and when we look at this particular perspective surrounding money, and the book was called Dollars Want Me. So rather than looking at it from the perspective of I want dollars, the book was discussing it from the perspective of dollars want me. I'll put a link in the description to the discussion I did, and I also did a follow-up discussion based on that book. I'll put a link to that as well. He said that changing your attitude towards business was the key. And the attitude that he gave was, do not seek it. See it as mentally already yours, and let it come. Attend yourself to details as they come to the surface. Consider business a principle that will run as runs a mountain stream when you remove your conscious will from it. Now, when we look at this at a deeper level, what we'll understand further what he's saying is exactly what we're discussing here, is that this conscious will is creating unnecessary resistance between where we are and where we want to be. We seem to not allow things to happen, insights and perspectives to flow. And that degree of allowing is revealed based on our tension or reactivity. Simply put, when we are allowing, we feel less of that reactivity in the day-to-day activities leading up to the vision. Now, I've spoken to many entrepreneurs on this journey, and I've reflected many times, and I reflect every day on my own experience, and I recognize that we know what we have to do to produce the results. We know we need to do something, and we also know when we don't need to do something. Now, we don't need to know all the steps to get to the destination. Certainly the pathway unfolds. It reveals itself over to the destination. Not only does it reveal the individualized pathway to the destination, but that revealing of the individualized pathway also reveals further understanding of how the I is not the physical body, that is rather something that is assigning interpretation to the physical body. Or you are not the mind even. You are assigning information or speech, as we've been talking about this, to the mind. And the mind carries out its instructions. Now, we consciously apply this in our dialogue, in our conversation. And the subconscious mind subconsciously carries out the instructions. We seem to, as we continue on this journey, are able to explain more things as we continue to bring forth a vision. For example, you bring forth a success in your life. You achieve a dream. You know more about yourself. You understand more about the relationship between the inner and the outer as a result. You also, through that journey of being committed and seeing it all the way to completion, excluded out of consciousness the limiting beliefs, interpretations that needed to be excluded out of consciousness. And through the process, you also develop a higher degree of self-confidence, self-esteem. So you conjure up in your mind's eye another vision. You desire to achieve something else in your life. And then you further go along on the journey to work with these two gifts of speech and mind. And then what you notice is that you are able to bring it forth with less inner resistance. Now, when we talk about mental strength, we reflect back on this quote as he states here. We think something perhaps with difficulty the first time. We think the same thing again and it becomes easier this time. We think it again and again, it becomes a mental habit. So bringing forth a vision becomes a mental habit. You stay committed to a vision, you bring it forth. You stay committed to the next vision, you bring it forth. You stay committed to the next vision, you bring it forth again and again and again, and you make that a habit. Bringing forth a vision can actually become a habit. And just like how we have formed other habits, we form a habit of the ability to bring forth as a habit. And we call this success consciousness. Someone who has success consciousness or abundance consciousness or wealth consciousness seems to, whatever they touch in that regard, turns to gold. Now, this person wants to guard their subconscious from any other kinds of interpretations that would change this kind of programming that is within itself, stored in the mind, knowing that you're identifying with an aspect that we would call the mind. So you're given a gift, you have a mind, and you want to observe what you are filling up in this mind. And if there's many things that you have filled up in this mind that seem to serve you, then you want to also ensure that you are maintaining those thought processes, those interpretations. And we do it again with a vision, another vision. So you achieve a goal, you set another goal, and you commit to it. Now, as a result of committing to a vision, you develop this mental strength. The mental strength is essentially being able to detach from the experience, assign accurate interpretation, and go back into the experience as you observe that you deal with it differently. Mental strength can also be characterized by a person recognizing at the different stages of the journey, although they are very engaged with the five sensory experience and in flow and in bliss with the experience of the day-to-day journey, they also recognize that there are points where they can step back from that and be able to look at it from a different identity, a different perspective. Now, this is something that we talk about in leadership. A leader has the ability to essentially look through another person's eyes and understand them. This is something that is a result of practicing what we're talking about here. So simply put, you pick a goal or a vision and you see it all the way to completion. In the process, you learn more about yourself. You discover yourself. You become better at using the two gifts of speech and mind. You have the gifts of speech and mind. Being integrated in the experiences each day actually calls for, in a way, forgetting I that is transcendent to the experience, the mind, and the inner speech. We become so caught up in what we're doing. And so what we want to do is dedicate time for reflection, because that's how we know we are accurately interpreting our experiences. So journaling or dedicating time at the end of the day to reflect back. I call this cause and effect reflections. Reflect back on your day-to-day experience and observe where you were being reactive. Now, as you identify these areas, you can find the meaning within accurate interpretation, because you know that your subconscious mind is part of the universal mind. And so then what happens is that you access this creative power. This is how we get ideas, hunches, and inspirations on how to work with whatever shows up on our day-to-day journey. For me, I use a simple filter. I say, I could either change how I relate to it, I could accept it the way it is, or I could do something about it, or a combination of those aspects to move forward. But all of this is found through experience. So the experience, essentially putting yourself in the journey to the realization, picking a goal and staying all the way with the goal till complete, allows you to develop a higher degree of this mental strength. And mental strength, as we look at it, is not done from a place of force, although we might think about it, but that's mental strain. Forcing our concentration on something is a form of mental strain. What we're interested in is mental strength from this regard of how he speaks about it, which is more automatic. And it is essentially by thinking the same thing again and again and again. So the interesting thing about being on the journey to bringing forth a vision, say the entrepreneurial journey, is that you commit to it and then your thoughts become about that journey. Not in an overwhelming way, but one in harmony. You begin to think about your business, your prospects, your clients, the marketing, the selling, the operations. You think about the opportunities that are available and so forth. And you're further saturating the mind, you're filling up the mind with conscious thought in relation to. And these thoughts, we want to ensure that they are from the optimist or what can be done perspective. Otherwise, if we have a lot of thoughts related to these attributes in relation to the vision from a can't perspective, then we're going to experience a lot of mental chatter, inner resistance, and so forth, unnecessarily so. Knowing that we are the ones that is facilitating these conversations, we want to ask ourselves, what are some things that we could do to further facilitate the optimist conversation? Well, we've been discussing this. Maintaining the ideal state of mind. Watch the video I did on change your state, change your life, because we recognize that from the ideal state of mind, and we've referred many times to the Robert Dilts model, ideal state of mind is the identity, the optimal values, beliefs, interpretations, assumptions, and behaviors and capabilities and environments flow from that. We seem to know what to do and what not to do when something doesn't need to be done about it. And we have inner peace. Another thing that we want to do is we want to identify any kind of disempowering, limiting beliefs and interpretations that we have and change those interpretations, because we seem to be further encouraging those through the reactivity or the tension and having that re-express again from the subconscious, ongoing on the journey. Then it seems like as we continue these journeys of bringing forth our vision, there's a sense of heaviness. Now, this is something that many of us experience on the journey. We've been calling this purification of the mind, which is purifying the mind from any kinds of interpretations that are not true of how we actually are. And as we purify this mind and we value the journey of the purification of the mind, it's easier to see something from the perspective of how it was discussed in the book, where he said, see it as mentally already yours and let it come. Because if we tie that into what Charles Handel says, is that the subconscious mind is part of the universal mind. The universal mind is the creative principle of the universe. A part must be the same in kind and quality as the whole. Then we know that we are actually connected to whatever attribute that is in relation to our vision and our vision. We're connected to it from within. If we think about it, we're connected to it. Now, when we recognize that we're connected to it, then we observe how we are connecting to it. So what's the meaning, the interpretations we're filling up in our mind with using the two gifts of speech and mind to relate to whatever it is. So in that particular discussion, he speaks, rather than seeing it from the perspective of I want dollars, he said dollars want me. Because that creates less resistance for many. Because the I want dollars would imply that a person was separate from that end result. And when a person says dollars want me, they feel less separate from it. We could even recognize, as we continue in this discussion, that you're one with it. It's all part of you. And it's all part of mind. And I, which is transcended to the mind, is filling up the mind via inner speech, imagination, and so forth, to externalize as how we experience our relationship to those attributes. So, and he states, the greatest and most marvelous power which this I has been given is the power to think. But few people know how to think constructively or correctly. Consequently, they achieve only indifferent results. So we want to order our conversations, as we've been discussing. This is an ongoing thing. And we want to enjoy ordering our conversations, our inner dialogues, because as we order our inner conversations, we see the changes that occur. And as we see these changes that occur, we reaffirm those changes to recognize that it is because of these changes that are happening within our consciousness and what we've been filling up our mind. And we continue down this journey to bring forth our vision and further purify the mind and do it again and again and again. And through this process, we further reveal deeper layers of this infinite mental powers. We start to notice that things happen in ways that we might not consciously be able to understand, but some way, somehow, we're able to bring forth the result. Opportunities show up. So I actually see it as an opportunity to find certain interpretations within myself. I don't like to run away from it, as I may have done before in the past, because now I know the power of the revelations. And you've heard me say this many times. Reality is both inspiring and revealing at the same time. It's revealing attributes that are within ourselves. And we have the power to make peace with these attributes that are within ourselves that are externalizing. Essentially what we are subconsciously saying I to. And inspiring as in what to do next. Because in that story that I shared a couple videos ago, or maybe in the last video, I shared of how when I had this hunch to reach out to somebody on Facebook when I was building my IT business, the earlier stages, and meet up with him. He introduced me to a steel company in which I did the IT services for them, and they introduced me to an accountant who introduced me to many, so much so that I had to actually tell her to not refer anymore to me because it was too much growth too fast. And then you could say that I was limiting myself at that point, but there was no shortage of opportunities. And so when we recognize that this is what's going on, is that the shortage of opportunities are interpretations within, then we actually enjoyed this journey of revealing what's within our subconscious and the, we would call, limiting beliefs that we are assigning certain interpretations to. So in recap, we want to recognize what he states here. The I of you is not the physical body. That is simply an instrument which the I uses to carry out its purposes. The I cannot be the mind, for the mind is simply another instrument which the I uses with which to think, reason, and plan. This allows us to ascend as well as integrate, because we are given the two gifts of speech and mind. We're given the gift of the body. We're given all these gifts. So we integrate very deeply with the experiences. And then as needed, we step back from it and observe what we are identifying as meaning and change that meaning, and then step back into the experience as we continue to enjoy the journey to the destination. So let's conclude this with an affirmation which we can further integrate into our understandings. We can say, I realize that the I is realizing itself. I realize that I interprets the different experiences that are contained within the mind. I realize that the I is one with the mind and the body, but is transcendent to the mind and body, and thus has the ability more so each day to identify the meaning that is accurate to the vision. Upon assigning the meaning that is accurate to the vision, the subconscious mind expresses itself to rearrange reality based on the rearrangement of the mind. I recognize then the power of the two gifts that I have, which is the gifts of speech and mind. I realize that I'm connected with all that is experienced with mind. I realize that the inner conversations, the inner thinking, reveals what I am identifying with. I'm able to then observe and make the changes accordingly, and I dedicate time each day to do this consciously. If you want a copy of the mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.